Welcome to the P's and Q's podcast by PerfectQuote. For each episode, we're going to share a pint and ask some questions to learn more about the current state of the employee benefits broker market and the future of insurance technology. Join me, Kevin Dawson, as we hear from industry leaders and insurance executives in the PerfectQuote team for great drinks and conversations. Well, welcome to the P's and Q's podcast by PerfectQuote. I am your host, Kevin Dawson, and today I am joined by Mark Rieder, Head of Innovation at NFP. Mark, welcome to the podcast.
What's happening, Kevin? Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I'm excited to have you on here. It's funny enough that we actually met 5 years ago at a PlanSource conference out in California. I heard you speak. That was the first big conference I got to speak at. And so I've been following you ever since.
Sweet. Yeah, no, I remember that. It was a nice place. I want to say it was in Utah. It wasn't California, was it?
Yeah, no, it's California. Yeah. We were at Half Moon Bay.
Oh, yeah. Great place.
Oh, it was beautiful.
Time of year, if I remember correctly, like June gloom. I thought I was expecting like this beautiful sunshine. And
it was a little overcast, but coming from Texas, a little bit cooler weather in the middle of summer was fantastic.
Yeah, listen, it was Half Moon Bay sitting there, and here I am complaining about the weather. So first word problem.
Well, Mark, as we typically do on the podcast, to kind of get to know our guests, we've got some rapid fire questions. So question number one, what was your very first job?
First job. I believe it was a bagger at a grocery store. And I still pride myself on taking control of the bagging and paper bags and the box. You have to put a nice foundation. And so I'm pretty sure that was it. I was also a camp counselor, but I think the grocery bagger came first.
Well, you say that and you say you take control. I mean, it seems like we're moving in that direction anyways with all the self-checkouts that are coming to grocery stores.
You're right. Yeah. So it's fun. I always like to, obviously, every time I go into this, my wife's like, "Oh shit, here he goes again," and talking to the guy who's sitting there, a gal that's sitting there bagging, and I'm trying to say, "Look at," like she's like, "They don't care," and she's right, they don't care.
So we were talking just before we started rolling. You brought a hazy IPA. I've got a hazy IPA. But when you typically go to the bar, what is your go-to order?
It's tequila, probably. I would say, tequila. Tequila rocks with a little soda maybe in there.
Yeah, you have a particular tequila brand that you like?
I know. It's funny, when I moved to Austin almost 10 years ago, was not a tequila drinker before that, but I was moving to Texas and I just felt like I have to like acquire this. And so I try a lot of different types of tequila. Lalo is the new one that I'm kind of looking at right now, but that could change, and I feel like there's a new one popping up every day. So
yeah. So obviously nobody grows up going, "Hey, I want to be in insurance." So what was that job that you wanted to be when you grew up?
I mean, listen, early days, like when I was a kid, I was a sports guy. I wanted to play baseball, hands down. That was what I wanted to do. But that was, elementary school type level stuff. I'm from Philadelphia, the Phillies, Mike Schmidt, Pete Rose, these guys, Charlie Hustle, that was good stuff. I think as I, progressed in my life, coming out of college, I wanted to be Joe Wall Street. I wanted to be a stockbroker. And it was just that time. And there was I interviewed up in the Avenue of Americas, got a couple job offers, but they were all these 2 years worth of training that were involved. And I really didn't want to train for 2 years. I wanted to get active. So there was this next best thing called financial planning. And little did I know that was life insurance sales. So kaboom, that's where I landed, and then quickly moved over into the group space because that kitchen table at night, calling all day, wasn't for me.
Gotcha. All right, next question. I know you're a CrossFit guy, and Justin told me that you have this ability to do a whole bunch of double unders. How many in a row can you do?
Yeah, I think I've done 420 something in a row ish. Someone in that area. Yeah, he got me. Yes, that is a claim to fame of mine.
So when you're working out, are you more of a podcast guy or a playlist guy, and what are you listening to?
So I don't listen, ironically enough, I don't listen to a ton of podcasts. I might listen to them for a little bit and then click on. So it's definitely playlist. But it's not even playlist. I'm very much Sonos and going to Pandora or something like that. And as far as what it is, I'm relatively eclectic. I grew up in high school in the 90s, my formative years, so I was a grunge guy there. When I moved to Texas, felt like I had to pick up country, which I did, but I bounced around, like the chill station on Pandora. But today I was listening to, I was going old school a little bit. It was the G Love and Special Sauce radio.
Nice.
So back to my roots from Philly. It was a nice Friday afternoon set.
Nice. Well, so Mark, I know you are really big into the insurtech space. Obviously, I've been following you for a couple of years now. And what I really want to kind of get your take on today. So I know NFP being one of the largest brokerages in the world, a lot of growth with the large brokers comes through the mergers and acquisitions, buying smaller firms and bringing them in. Sometimes they're in large markets, sometimes they're in small markets. And how does a large agency like NFP create efficiency with technology when you're acquiring these smaller firms? Because a lot of those smaller firms are still doing things, not so efficiently, and you're trying to create more efficiencies to create more profitability and productivity. So how does someone like NFP do that?
Yeah, I would say we're like everybody else. That when you make an acquisition, part you're acquiring the people and the leadership, obviously their EBITDA, their margin and their revenue, but you have to get a lift, right? You have to get a lift on that as soon as you acquire them. I want to tell you that we and every other large agency are the most streamlined and efficient in the world, and they have technology laden throughout every aspect of their business. But I'd be lying to you, right? I think the industry as a whole has still yet to completely embrace all the capabilities that are out there. Some of it is because of the rapid fire acquisitions and the need to bring everybody on because we're in a data-driven world. And so I said the biggest area right off the bat is probably consolidation around agency management systems, CRMs, so you can get a sight line into the business and to the customer, the lines of coverage that are in place, so you can understand policies per customer and where there's opportunity to cross sell or bring some of the specialty that we have to the table to the block of business that exists. So I think that's clearly, I think, always our first and probably many others' first step. After that, to be honest with you, there's a lot of consolidation around just vendors that people are using up and down the board. And then also consolidation of carriers and volumes of business drive margin. So like if those were they're the top three. I mean, I'd love to tell you that it was, we literally were going to take what they did and take them from, Flintstones to Jetsons, but that's not really the case. And, it's somewhat purposeful as well. You have to maintain, if you want to continue to have engagement from a firm you bring on board, you don't want to completely like flip the tables on them and completely have them doing everything, because you might be cutting off their nose to spite your face. And but those are the areas we focus. And I would say, it could also be, we have a specialty focus, let's say on our PNC side of the house, focus on small group and focus on personal lines. So we'll bleed that piece of the business into like a national practice and hopefully pick up some lift there on scale and efficiencies.
I came from a small agency that was acquired in that process. And I remember watching coming from, being how we did things, like, hey, we thought we were doing things efficiently, creating all these things. And we looked at, the technology and go, yeah, we know this is going to create efficiency. But sometimes it felt like what we were being told coming from corporate to how we operated, sometimes there was miscommunication, or sometimes it was even just, hey, you just, as you were saying just a second ago, like, we don't want to rush anybody into it. But sometimes that there's so many, they're using different platforms from what everybody else is using. So how do you kind of get everybody to slowly transition in a way that is efficient and, gets people on board? Because I think buying into technology, especially for some of the more senior insurance professionals, that's a hard sell for them.
Yeah, people always ask, like, what's the biggest challenge before they get that question out, I say people, right? And so, we've done a really good job of, I think that the decision to move and to innovate and to, in our case, we're going through a digital transformation strategy. It has to be the business that owns it. It has to be the people in the business, and the job of a person like myself and anybody that's involved on our team and the leadership is to help, lay the breadcrumbs out there, build the foundation, and then, be patiently persistent, because the aha moments happen at different times. Jamming it down their throats, as much as I would love to be the one, and we have the tools out there to reinvent the way we do business in every aspect. The framework's there. We're just working on adoption, and that adoption comes at different times in different places at different moments. And you have to be patient enough to allow that to happen. Otherwise, A, it's not going to be transformative, because you're not going to be able to get to the core of the business, which is the data organization. And B, it's going to be short-lived, because you're not going to get the full adoption of the full buy-in. So it's cultural, and then it's, a platform, and then it's structured, and then it's buy-in, and then it's, be patient. And that's not with a lot of like sigh moments, you're like, but it's necessary. It doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah, so I agree. So in an ideal world, what does a timeline for that look like, especially for a large agency like NFP? What is, when you're adopting new technology to create efficiencies for your teams, what would an ideal timeline look like to say, hey, we're going to put this in, we're going to implement it, we're going to train people and get people rolling? Because I know for some it can take a couple of months to a couple of years.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you look at the overarching complete business, and if you're being transformative and starting at the core root of the way in which your data is organized, which I think if you're not doing that, your ability to start to take advantage of some of the really cool stuff that's starting to happen now with generative AI, is going to be limited. So as much as it's a longer process to go all the way back to the blocking and tackling and where and how your people save data and what they do and how they obtain data. And it's like, I always go through digitization versus digitalization to get to transformation. Like, that is a multi-year process. Now, while you have that foundation, you're going to find different aspects of the business that raise their hand and say, hey, we want to adopt this technology and streamline what we're doing. And so in some cases, you're going in and you're inserting a new piece of technology to reinvent the business legacy and new business. What I've found is your better chance is to kind of focus in on, let's say, new revenue opportunities or a certain area that's not going to buck with the existing business, because people are very adamant about retention and customer relationship, and find some wins and learn, and then apply it to your legacy business. So I don't know that there's a specific time frame. Each one's going to be a little different, but again, that patience has to be there. And going back to the full, let's say if you're looking to transform your organization as a whole, that is a multi-year process for sure.
Absolutely. Well, Mark, I know that you being head of innovation at NFP, you're always looking at what's coming to the insurtech space. So I would love to get your perspective on what are some of the latest trends in technology for brokers and firms that you're seeing that is on the horizon or currently being implemented that people should start looking at?
Yeah, I would say that, I mean, there's all the buzz right now, open AI and ChatGPT and generative AI and the language models. And that, I think, is a game changer. There's been technologies that have been launched over the course of the last several, decades, years, whatever. This I think has a chance to make bigger impact quicker, and it has really sped up a lot of development, adoption, and really use cases to utilize AI. AI being the overarching umbrella that I speak of and everything that falls underneath it. So when I don't look at necessarily the tools, I look at where the opportunity is to embrace this new, technology, we'll call it, that has hit the market. So I think compliance, and also when you go back to your change, you're talking about change management and implementing. You would never argue that there aren't a gazillion different inefficiencies in the insurance industry. The challenge winds up being that we are also a very much revenue driven business, and the excitement and getting people's attention, people get excited more about sexy sales than they do about I created some efficiencies, because they've seen efficiencies in the past that never panned out around like the real margin improvement. So I think there's this opportunity to focus on that. But this next thing after sales that they are focused on, they meaning leadership, et cetera, is compliance and risks to their own business. So I think there's a huge opportunity to bring, AI tools into play when it comes to compliance, whether it's be complying with the ever-changing regulations that exist, or even, the extraction and comparison tools for contracts and clauses within contracts that can ultimately, get you in trouble. Super big focus. Every conference you go to now is talking about experience. And a lot of folks talk about customer experience. I think it actually bleeds back to user experience as well, internal. So when you think of that, you think of using tools to aggregate and analyze data quicker to make better product recommendations, more personalized product recommendations at point of sale. Obviously part of that is also then rolling into rating tools, right? Small group and personal lines coverages, chat bots, virtual assistants. We're seeing a lot of that today coming out, and in part, some of that is actual, the computer responding, and some of it might be human aided, but taking a little different approach there. Document policies, processing, creation. I think if folks aren't embracing right now ChatGPT, and I know there's obviously controversy when you look at the universities and colleges, et cetera. However, like if you need to craft a little blurb for your presentation, I just did it yesterday. Literally, it took me 2 seconds. I would have sat there and rewrote it 7 times and wasted 45 minutes of my day. Like you should be in there doing that.
I mean, full disclosure for anybody who follows me on LinkedIn, my newsletter is completely Chat GPT with me editing.
It should be, right? Yeah, I always read it, right? I'm not going with it because there are errors in there, and there's obviously these pitfalls with generative AI and Chat GPT where we are today. But like, listen, it's a great first proof. As long as you can make sure you work with it to get out of it what you want. And I think after that, it is and has been point solutions for, managing risk or health and disease and or mitigating risk. It depends on what side of the business. And my role expands beyond its benefits, but it's also P&C, retirement, executive benefits, life insurance, wealth management. And so I'm looking at a variety of different tools out there, and Bluetooth enabled, drone, sensors, helping to not only mitigate risk, but then grab data. And then, you take all that, bundle it together, and I think that the data analytic tools are super important to be able to make some information out of the data that we're capturing, and that is at our disposal.
I agree, and it's always been said, data drives decision making, regardless of whatever it is. The more access to data, the better decisions you can make. As you see all this change in the technology landscape, is there anything in particular to you that just gets you really excited about what's coming?
Well, this generative AI does, and I'm working on something. Here's the reality of it, and it's not our people; it's every people. People, in generally speaking, are lazy, right? So what do computers do? Computers help to streamline the work that humans have done historically. And generative AI is allowing to take some of that and actually put it on steroids and get to the point where, there may not need to be a UI present in some tools in the future, and rather there's a prompt that asks, "Hey, I'm going to see XYZ customer. Tell me about them." Now, if you were sitting in here and maybe you did this with me, I know I did with you. Like, hey, I'm going to speaking to Kevin. I want to go over to LinkedIn. I'm going to check out what's going on with him. I'm going to search around, see what's going on, maybe check out some of his other podcasts, and I'm going to now form in my brain, who Kevin is, what I might want to talk to him about to be in a more personalized way. I'm going to have a better outcome there. And that's what salespeople do all the time. I don't know that everybody in the industry does it. And if we could, we would do, and we do it in our personal lives. I'm not going to talk to the buddy down the street about something that I know isn't relevant to him. If he doesn't have kids or if he's not into sports or whatever it might be, you automatically talk in a personalized fashion. If you could do that across the board with everybody you interacted with business, you know your outcomes would be better. But you couldn't do that before because you didn't have the time. And you have an employer that has 1,000 lives or 10,000 lives and all these different customers. You didn't have the time. Well, now you do. Like we just talked about it with writing, write-ups for your podcast introductions, whatever.
Yeah.
You turn from 45 minutes to like 30 seconds. That's what I'm most excited for, is basically being able to take technology. Always required humans to actually implement it. We just talked about why it takes forever. I think if you can layer on top of it an easy button that does some of the work, the adoption is going to be, automatically go a little bit on a hockey stick. That's what I'm excited about. Whether or not that's true, I don't know. That's one man's opinion. I have no idea.
No, I'm with you on there, and I think there's a lot of things to be excited about, and yeah, the generative AI, the more that I get involved with utilizing those type of resources for my own business, for my own personal research to impact the clients that I work with, it definitely changes the game. And so yeah, you say humans are inherently lazy. I always say I'm not lazy, I'm just efficient.
Totally get it.
Yeah.
Totally get it. And by the way, like, shocker, media outlets are portraying AI as being the end of the world. Like they do on a lot of other things, depending upon where you look, you're not quite sure what it is. And I think that impacts folks, and they get really worried about it, and they get like worried about their job, and it's going to, no, it's not. It's going to, there is this need to retrain or, refocus in different areas. But the stuff that you can utilize AI driven tools to manage more effectively, it's not the stuff that anybody wants to do anyway, for the most part, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you think back over the course of human history, and anytime new technology comes along, it does definitely creates efficiency, which does reduce the need for human interaction in some capacity. But those who are smart enough are going to find ways to embrace that technological change, use it to their advantage, and become the expert of utilizing it, and be that next big change in the industry.
Correct. It's just and it's hard, right? And it's scary for some, but it's necessary. It's been happening forever in every industry. There's been advancements, and there's been a bubble over the insurance industry for quite some time. I thought it would have popped earlier than it has, but it's leaking. It's leaking air.
Yeah, well, I mean, insurance, we move at the speed of smell. So I have one last question for you, as we've been talking, to kind of bring this back around, because we've been talking a lot about, started with large brokers.
Yeah.
What about the small broker who, they may be the senior broker, who has, looking at an exit strategy, and mergers and acquisitions is a way for them to make sure that they transition their business to somebody well. What are ways that smaller brokers and smaller firms can embrace technology to make themselves more attractive to organizations like NFP who want to look for great partners to acquire?
Yeah. So, I mean, I shift that a little bit. I would say, smaller brokers, and we won't classify been in business for a while looking to exit, or let's say new entrants that are looking to build to get to that point. In both scenarios, technology is affordable down market. I actually think that they're in a better position to embrace all the tools and create a new work model than the larger organizations are within a time frame. Certainly, they don't have the ability to have a development staff like we do, and they don't have the full IT staff, et cetera. But most of your technology tools that are in play right now, whether it goes from like a quoting tool, an agency management tool, maybe some tool over here to communicate more effective with the employer and the employees, like they're available, they're down market. It's no longer only, you can't say that you don't have the resources to invest in those tools because they're affordable. And I think if you do that, and now if I'm applying it to a smaller block of business, If I'm applying it to a business that I have more control and visibility around, then I can do it in a more effective fashion quicker, right? So now, great. Well, outside of that being a way to attract and retain business, it now gives you visibility into your business. You can get really scientific with your business. And I think is ultimately attractive to a firm like ours, if we went in and we asked somebody during the due diligence phase, show me your revenue model, show me the way you generate business, show me your margin, etc. And in the past, even back when I was acquired, now this is 20 years ago, that's a process, right? It takes a while to gather all this stuff. It shouldn't. It should be a push of a button. I think you always, as an organization, would always want to know exactly where your efficiencies are, where you're spending money. And previously, there wasn't enough technology available to you in an affordable fashion for you to make that investment to know it. But you've always wanted to know it. Now you can, right? So like, that's where I think the focus should be. And not only will that make you attractive for an acquisition because you're going to be able to pinpoint everything for them, they're then going to look at that and say, wow, like they would be a great addition. We can learn from them. We can bring them in and be part of the team and from a real life example. So that's my opinion of where we would go. And like, I can point to the fact that when I launched, my history is that 21 years ago, sold my business to NFP. I had a business partner that we built a business out of college, and we used at that time in the late 90s Ben admin technology to differentiate. And so I know that it not only helped us acquire a business, but also made us an attractive acquisition, even though we weren't the largest. I think we actually were the smallest and maybe the youngest, but I think there was an appeal to bringing something new into the organization.
Love it. Mark, how can our listeners find out more about you and more about NFP?
Yeah, so nfp.com, a real clip for those of you. We're an insurance brokerage consulting shop, about 7,000 employees globally, mostly in the States, Canada, big presence and a growing presence in the UK, specialties across the board. So nfp.com, you'll find everything you need to know. And as far as myself goes, on LinkedIn, I'd love to tell you I knew what my handle was, but it's Rieder. So M-A-R-K.
We'll put it in the show notes for everybody.
Yeah, there's like a handle there. I couldn't even tell you what the heck it is, but that's where it is. I love to connect with folks.
Well, fantastic. Mark, thank you so much for joining me for some pints and questions today. I really enjoyed kind of learning from you. And as I said, been following you for the last several years and always excited to see anytime you share something because to me, it's interesting.
Yeah, well, I appreciate the opportunity. It was a lot of fun chatting, and cheers to you.
Cheers. Well, thank you for listening to the P's and Q's podcast by PerfectQuote. For more information on PerfectQuote, check us out at www.perfectquote.io or send an email to sales@perfectquote.io. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, and we'll see you next time for more pints and questions.